She was in my home every Sunday. She held my daughter at the hospital when she was born. I cried on her shoulder more times than I cried on my own mother's. And the whole time, every single time, she was working against me. I want to tell you exactly how I found out.
This is everything we have on the matter. The decision is now yours.
Because it started with a crayon drawing, and it ended with a court date she never saw coming. I want you to picture something for me. Picture yourself standing in your own kitchen, the kitchen you picked out the cabinets for, the kitchen where you taught your daughter how to make pancakes on Saturday mornings, and holding a piece of paper that a 7-year-old drew with a 64-count Crayola set. That paper is in my hands right now, in my memory. And even now, years later, when I think about that moment, I feel the floor drop out from under me all over again. Because that drawing, that simple, innocent purple and yellow crayon drawing, was the thing that cracked open a secret that had been living inside my house for 3 years. 3 years. While I was working, while I was cooking, while I was putting my daughter to bed, and whispering that she was loved and safe and everything was okay. The two people I trusted the most in the world were quietly, methodically, and very deliberately building a life where I didn't exist. I'm going to tell you this whole story. Every piece of it. And I'm not going to rush it, because it deserves to be told right. My name is Michelle. And this is the story of how I almost lost everything, and what I did when I decided I wasn't going to. Before I get into all of it, and I promise you we are going there, I have to stop for just a second. Because right now, wherever you are in the world listening to this, I just want you to know that I see you. Truly. I know some of you are driving, some of you are washing dishes, some of you are sitting in a parking lot not ready to go inside yet. And I want you to know this channel exists because of moments exactly like that. The moments when you just need to hear someone else's story to remind you that you're not alone. So do me a favor right now, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Seriously. It can be your city, your state, your country, whatever you feel comfortable sharing. We have people listening from places I never imagined when we started this channel, and it genuinely means the world to every single one of us here. You are not just a number. You are the reason we do this. And if you're new, welcome. Truly welcome. If this story moves you, if it hits something real for you, please hit that subscribe button. It costs you nothing and it means everything to us. We put real work into finding and telling these stories, and your support is how we keep going. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. You never know who in your life is going through something similar and just doesn't have the words yet. Okay. Now let me take you back to the beginning. Because for you to understand that crayon drawing, you need to understand what my life looked like before everything fell apart. I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina. Middle child. My parents were solid, working people. My dad managed a distribution warehouse for 22 years. My mom worked in the school system as an attendance coordinator. They weren't wealthy, but they were present. They showed up. They argued sometimes, sure, but they always made up. I grew up believing that was just what marriage looked like. Two real people doing real life together. I went to UNC Charlotte for business administration. Graduated, got a job in HR at a mid-sized logistics company, worked my way up. By the time I was 32, I was a senior HR manager, overseeing a team of 11 people. I had a condo I was proud of, a car I'd paid off, and a savings account that finally had a real number in it. I met Derek at a mutual friend's 4th of July cookout. He was tall, easy to laugh, wearing a navy polo, and holding a paper plate like he'd never been to a barbecue before in his life. I remember laughing at that. He was a project manager at a construction firm, reliable, grounded, the kind of man who carried a planner in his back pocket and actually used it. We dated for 2 years. He was patient with me. Kind. He remembered the little things. We got married in October, 3 weeks after my 31st birthday. Small wedding, about 80 people. His parents, Linda and Gerald, sat in the front row. Linda cried at the ceremony. Not a little, full, mascara-running, happy mom crying. I thought that was beautiful. I thought, this woman loves her son so much that watching him be loved by someone else makes her fall apart. I didn't understand yet what it actually meant. Gerald passed away 14 months after the wedding. Heart attack, totally unexpected. Derek was devastated. He and his dad had been close. Fishing trips every Thanksgiving, the kind of father-son relationship that looked effortless from the outside. And Linda was just shattered. She didn't know what to do with herself. She'd been married to that man for 34 years. Her whole adult identity was built around being Gerald's wife. So Derek started calling her more, driving up to see her on weekends, which was completely understandable, and I supported it without hesitation. What I didn't realize was that during that grieving period, during those long drives and phone calls and Sunday dinners, something shifted in Linda. Something that, in hindsight, I can only describe as possessiveness. Like losing Gerald had rerouted all of that deep marital attachment directly onto Derek. Her son had become her anchor, and I was the thing standing between her and the anchor. I didn't see it at first. I want to be really honest about that, because people always ask, how did you not notice? And the answer is because she was good. Linda was patient, sweet, warm, and deeply practiced at looking like the perfect mother-in-law. She remembered my coffee order. She sent me birthday cards with handwritten notes that were genuinely thoughtful. When I was sick one winter with a bad sinus infection, she drove 40 minutes to bring me soup and a magazine. She told me once, sitting at my kitchen table, that she was so grateful Derek had found someone as strong and capable as me. That she'd been worried about him. That I had made him better. I believed her. Every single word. Our daughter Kayla was born when I was 34. And if I thought Linda loved me before, she went full grandmother mode in a way that was honestly hard not to adore. She was at the hospital with flowers before we'd even been moved to the recovery room. She knitted Kayla a blanket. She watched her twice a week when Derek and I were both at work, because we trusted her, and because having free childcare from a loving grandmother felt like a gift. It was, in fact, the opposite of a gift. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The first 3 years of our marriage felt real. Not perfect, no marriages, but real. Derek worked long hours sometimes. I worked long hours sometimes. We were tired. We bickered about money occasionally, about whose turn it was to do what, about vacations we kept planning and not taking. Normal stuff. The kind of friction that just lives in any relationship, where two adults are genuinely trying to build something together. Linda visited every other Sunday. She and I would sometimes sit on the back patio while Derek played with Kayla in the yard, and we'd drink iced tea and just talk. About her garden. About the neighborhood gossip. About a documentary she'd watched. It was easy. It was comfortable. I thought it was real. Looking back, I can pinpoint the exact moment something first felt off. Not dramatically off, not the kind of thing that makes you sit up straight and say, wait a minute. More like a small, cool draft from a door that shouldn't be open. It was a Tuesday night. Kayla was almost 2. I'd had a rough day at work, a contentious termination process that had taken 3 weeks to resolve and left me drained. I came home to find Derek on the phone in the back bedroom, door mostly shut, talking quietly. I knocked and poked my head in. He looked up, held up one finger just a sec, and turned slightly away. That wouldn't be weird in most circumstances. But I'd caught the last 3 words before he turned. She doesn't know. She doesn't know. When he came out 5 minutes later, I asked who he was talking to. He said, Mom, just checking in on her. Which was completely plausible. Linda called often. There was no reason not to believe him. But those 3 words sat in me like a splinter. Small. Invisible. Just uncomfortable enough that you couldn't forget it was there. I told myself, he's probably planning something. A surprise. Maybe Linda was asking about anniversary ideas. I actively manufactured a benign explanation and accepted it. Because the alternative, the idea that Derek might be hiding something, didn't fit the version of my husband I'd built my life around. About 6 weeks later, I was paying bills online. We had a joint checking account that we both used for household expenses, and I noticed the balance was lower than I expected. Not dramatically, but noticeably. I went back through the transactions and found 2 transfers I didn't recognize. Each one was a few $100s, transferred to an account I didn't have saved. Both labeled simply family. I asked Derek about it that evening. He explained, very calmly, that he'd lent money to his cousin Kyle, who was going through a hard stretch. Totally possible, Kyle had struggled on and off for years. I nodded. I asked if he needed anything. He said no, Kyle was handling it, not to worry. I did not transfer money to any family account after that. But over the next few months, small amounts kept moving. Never enough to be alarming on its own. Always with a plausible explanation. A car repair. A medical bill. A deposit on something for the house. Each story made sense in isolation. I just didn't add them up. Not yet. The third thing, and this one I actually brushed off and then felt genuinely ashamed of myself for later, was Linda. She'd started dropping in unannounced. Not constantly, but more than before. She'd just be in the area on a Wednesday afternoon. She'd want to pick Kayla up from daycare because she missed her so much on a random Thursday. And whenever she came over, she had a habit of moving through the house in a way that felt less like a guest and more like someone checking inventory. She'd open the fridge, go through the mail on the counter while I was in another room. I once walked back in to find her sorting through an envelope that had come from my HR professional association. I told myself she was just comfortable. That her generation didn't think twice about those things. That it was a cultural thing, a family thing, a grieving widow thing. I made excuses for every single behavior. And at nights lying in bed, I'd think, am I being paranoid? Am I one of those women who can't let her husband have a good relationship with his mother? So I said nothing. I held my splinter and I stayed quiet. The suspicion started to grow real legs about 8 months after that first phone call. It started with something small. Derek mentioned, in passing, that his company was switching insurance providers and that there might be a gap in our coverage during the transition. I didn't think much of it. But 2 weeks later, I was at the doctor's office for a routine checkup and was told that my insurance had been updated and that I was no longer listed as the primary policyholder on the family plan. I assumed it was an admin error. I called Derek. He said he'd look into it. He said it was probably just the transition, a glitch. He sounded calm and unbothered. But something in me had quietly reached its limit. I didn't argue. I just started paying more attention. I started keeping a small notebook in my car. Every transaction from the joint account that I didn't immediately understand went in that notebook. Every unexplained absence. Every dropped call. Every time Derek's demeanor shifted slightly when he got a text, and he angled his phone screen away. It wasn't everything. It wasn't even dramatic. But it was mine. And it was growing. One Saturday afternoon, Kayla was napping and Derek had run out to the hardware store. Linda stopped by. She had a casserole dish she wanted to return. Normal enough. But she seemed agitated. In a way, she was trying to hide behind her usual warmth. She poured herself a glass of water without being offered one, sat at the kitchen island, and started asking me questions. Not the normal Sunday questions. More specific ones. How's work going? Any big changes coming up? You still liking it there? I know HR can be such a stressful field. Derek mentioned you've been pretty slammed lately. Is everything okay? I answered normally. But on the inside, I'd gone very still. Because Derek and I hadn't talked about my work stress in weeks. I'd been handling it privately, not wanting to add to his plate. How did Linda know I'd been slammed? After she left, I sat at that kitchen island for a long time. And I thought about a phrase my grandmother used to say. If you want to know what's really going on in a house, watch who's comfortable in it. Linda was very, very comfortable in my house. That night, I did something I hadn't done before. I checked our cellular account. We shared a family plan, and I looked at call logs. Not detailed content, just frequency. And what I found wasn't an affair. It wasn't another woman. It was something I almost didn't process at first because it was so unexpected. Derek called his mother. Every single day. Not a quick check-in. Calls that ran 40 minutes, sometimes an hour. Always during my work hours. Always on weekdays. And sometimes, several times a week, Linda called first. I sat with that for a long time. I didn't know what it meant yet. But I knew it meant something. The person I talked to next was my friend and coworker Renee. Renee had been married, divorced, remarried. She had seen some things. I trusted her more than almost anyone. Over lunch one afternoon, I laid it out. The account transfers, the insurance change, the phone calls, the dropped words, Linda's questions. Renee listened, leaned back and said, Michelle, girl, I don't want to scare you, but you need to find out where that money is going. Not ask Derek, find out. She also said, it's probably nothing. Men and their mamas are a whole thing. Don't spiral before you have facts. I held on to the second part of that advice when I should have held on to the first. The discovery didn't happen all at once. It came in pieces, and each piece rewrote what I thought I already knew. The first piece, our property. Derek and I had bought our house 3 years prior. It was in both our names. I'd made sure of that when we were going through the closing documents, because I wasn't about to put my income into a property that wasn't legally mine. But when I pulled our mortgage statement one evening, just routine, I told myself I noticed something. An equity line of credit had been opened against the house. I hadn't signed anything for an equity line. My name was on their account. My credit had been used. But I had no memory, zero, of agreeing to open that line. I went cold all over. My hands started shaking. I pulled out every piece of paper I had relating to the house and started going through them on the living room floor while Kayla slept upstairs and Derek was at a work dinner. And there, buried in a packet of documents from about 11 months prior, was a signature line with my name on it in handwriting that looked enough like mine to be mine. But I could not remember signing it. The equity line had drawn about $40,000. Drawn and sent somewhere. I know I should have called an attorney that night. I know that now. But what I actually did was sit on my floor for 2 hours convincing myself I must have signed and forgotten. I talked myself out of what my eyes were showing me because my brain refused to load the true version of events. The second piece came from Kayla. My daughter was in first grade at this point, at the elementary school 3 blocks from our house. Her teacher, Miss Pearson, was a warm and perceptive woman who adored her. Kayla was doing a unit on families, drawing pictures, writing sentences, the kind of thing first graders do. One Thursday, Kayla came home with a rolled-up paper and said she'd made a picture of our family for school. I unrolled it on the kitchen table. She'd drawn 4 figures in crayon. Herself, she always drew herself with long braids and a yellow dress. Derek, tall, with a brown suit. And then, instead of me, she'd drawn 2 more figures. One was labeled Daddy. One was labeled Grammy Linda. And then, slightly to the side, smaller, separate, one more figure. This one had short hair and a red top. Who's this? I asked, pointing to the smaller figure. Kayla said, without hesitation, that's the lady at the new house. The floor dropped out from under me. I kept my voice completely level. I said, what new house, baby? And Kayla, with the absolute uncomplicated honesty that only a 6-year-old can deliver, said, Daddy's other house. Grammy Linda's house where we go sometimes. The lady lives there too. She makes us grilled cheese. I asked her how often she went there. She shrugged and said, sometimes. I asked her if she'd ever seen Mommy's picture there. She thought about it and said no. I looked at that crayon drawing for a long time. And then I understood what the transfers were. What the equity line was. What the insurance change was. What every single one of Linda's visits to my home had actually been. She wasn't checking in. She wasn't being a loving grandmother. She was a scout. She was my husband's most trusted operative in what had been, for at least 2 years, a methodical campaign to relocate his entire life. Financially, emotionally, legally, away from me. The new house was a rental property in Derek's name alone. I found the deed online in less than 20 minutes. It had been purchased 17 months ago. The down payment matched exactly, down to the dollar, what had been drawn from that equity line on our home. He had mortgaged our house to buy himself a separate life. And Linda had known. Linda had helped. Linda had been bringing my daughter into that house, introducing her to a woman whose name I still didn't know yet, normalizing a world where I didn't exist, all while sitting at my kitchen table drinking my coffee and telling me I was a wonderful wife. I need to stop here for a moment, because I know what you just felt, and I felt it too. I feel it every time I revisit this. If you're sitting there right now thinking, no way, or I knew something was wrong, I need you to drop that in the comments. Seriously, tell me where you landed. Were you shocked? Did you see something coming that I didn't? Drop it below. I read every single comment, and I mean that. And wherever you are right now, tell me. Someone in our community, last month, wrote in from a small town in rural Montana and said this story felt like it was written just for her. And that's why we do this. That's exactly why. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or your country in the comments. We're building something real here and your voice matters. If you haven't subscribed yet, please. I'm asking you sincerely. These stories take so much research, time, care, And your subscribe button is literally what keeps the lights on. Hit it right now. It's free. And it means everything to us. Okay. Stay with me. Because what I did next, you need to hear it all. I did not cry that night. I want you to understand that because I think people expect that part of the story. The crumpling, the gasping, the immediate unraveling. And maybe I should have cried. Maybe it would have been healthier. But what I actually did was put Kayla to bed with her stuffed elephant and her nightlight and her 3 books. And then I went into the bathroom, turned on the shower so no one could hear me if Derek came home, sat down on the tile floor, and I breathed. Just breathed. For maybe 20 minutes. And then I stood up, turned off the shower, and began to think like the HR professional I am. Because that's what I do. When things fall apart in a company, terminations, investigations, legal liability, I am the person who builds a case. I document. I organize. I create timelines. I find what's missing. I plan the exit strategy before anyone else in the room knows an exit is coming. I was going to do that for myself. The following morning, I called in sick to work, first time in 2 years, and I drove to see a family law attorney named Patricia Holt, whose name I'd found on the Bar Association's referral list. I sat across from her in her office in Uptown Charlotte, and I laid out everything I knew. The equity line, the property, the transfers, the insurance change, the phone calls, the crayon drawing. Patricia listened without interrupting. She was probably 50, silver-haired, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, and she had the quiet, contained energy of someone who had heard everything and was still capable of being precise and calm about all of it. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You need to understand what you're dealing with. This is not just a marital problem. Based on what you're describing, there may be elements of financial fraud, specifically the use of your identity to open the equity line without your knowledge or consent. That's a civil issue and potentially a criminal one. Do you still have the original documents from your closing?" I said I did. She said, "Get them. Don't tell your husband. Don't change your behavior. Don't freeze any accounts yet. If he notices, he'll accelerate whatever he's planning. You are going to be very, very calm and very, very busy." I paid her retainer that afternoon. And then I went home and made dinner. Derek came home at 6:30. He asked how my day was. I said fine, a little tired. He poured himself a glass of water, played with Kayla for an hour, fell asleep on the couch watching a baseball game. I watched him sleep from the kitchen doorway. This man I had loved, that I had moved toward with everything I had, whose mother had held my newborn daughter. This man had spent 2 years quietly dismantling the life we were supposed to be building together. I didn't feel rage yet. I felt something colder and more focused than rage. I felt like I was finally seeing clearly. Over the next 6 weeks, I operated in a way that I still, to this day, am proud of. Not because it felt good, it didn't. Every single day of those 6 weeks was one of the loneliest, most exhausting experiences of my life. But I was precise. And precision, in a situation like that one, is survival. Patricia had given me a list. I worked through it methodically. First, I got copies of every financial account I could access. Joint checking, savings, the mortgage, the equity line documents. I photographed them at the attorney's office, so nothing was missing from our home. Patricia's paralegal helped me build a spreadsheet of every transfer that had left our joint account over the previous 30 months. The total, when we mapped it all out, was close to $68,000. Some had gone to the rental property. Some had gone to an account I later found out was in Derek's name only, opened at a different bank, a bank we didn't share. Some had gone, in smaller amounts, directly into Linda's checking account. Linda's account. She wasn't just a bystander. She was receiving money. Second, I requested, through my attorney, a forensic review of the equity line documents. It took 3 weeks. The result was what I expected and feared. My signature had been forged. The notary stamp on the document was legitimate, which meant someone had presented a forged signature in person to a notary. That notary had since retired and relocated. We were working on tracking them down. Third, I hired a private investigator. I want to be honest, I debated this longer than I should have. It felt like crossing a line. But Patricia made it plain. You need documentation of his life at that property. Who's coming and going? Whether Kayla is there regularly. Because if he files for custody, And based on what you're describing, that may be his plan. You need to have evidence of the environment your daughter is being brought into without your knowledge or consent. The PI, a quiet, methodical man named Dennis who wore khakis and looked like someone's favorite uncle, began his work within the week. Fourth and hardest, I kept showing up. Every Sunday dinner. Every conversation with Linda. Every family text thread. I kept my voice warm and my face neutral, and I said, "Sounds good. And how are you feeling? And let me know if you need anything," and I did not let a single micro-expression betray what I knew. Renee was the only person in the world who knew what was happening. She kept my secret like a vault and called me every night at 8 o'clock, when Derek was usually in the other room, just to check in. There was one night, a Wednesday about 4 weeks in, when I almost broke. Linda had called to ask if she could take Kayla that weekend for a sleepover. She did this regularly. It was normal. I said of course, and I kept my voice warm. And when I hung up the phone, I went outside and stood in the backyard in the dark, and I had to physically press my hands against my own chest, because I was so close to falling apart. Because what I knew now, what the PI had confirmed in his first report, was that when Kayla went for sleepovers at Grammy Linda's, she went first to the rental house. She spent time there. The woman whose name I now knew was a paralegal named Stacy, had been in Kayla's life for at least a year. My daughter had a routine at a house she'd never been allowed to tell me about. I stood in that backyard and I made a decision. I stopped grieving. And I started finishing. The confrontation happened on a Saturday morning in March. I had been very deliberate about the setting. Patricia had advised me strongly to let the legal process drive everything. Don't tip your hand, don't confront, let the paperwork do the talking. And I agreed with her in theory. But there was something I needed Derek and Linda to understand, that no court document could convey the way a room could. I had invited Linda for Sunday brunch. I'd told Derek I wanted to do something, as a family, the three of us, just a nice morning. He'd seemed surprised but pleased. Linda had said she'd bring a fruit salad. What neither of them knew was that I had already 2 days prior filed for divorce. I had already submitted the forensic document analysis to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Financial Crimes Unit. I had already transferred my share of the joint savings, which my attorney had confirmed was legally mine to do, into an account in my name only. I had already spoken to Kayla's school and filed a formal notice that she was not to be released to anyone other than me or a designated authorized pickup, without my prior written consent. I had already called Renee, who was sitting in her car 2 streets over with her phone on, ready to come if I called. And I had already told my mother everything. My mother, who had driven up from Concord the night before and was currently sitting at my neighbor's house, 3 doors down, waiting. Derek came into the kitchen that morning in a good mood. He made coffee. He was humming. He asked what I was making and I said eggs and toast, and he said great. And he poured 2 mugs, and one of them, as always, he handed to me with 2 sugars already in it. I took it. I said thank you. And I looked at him. I thought about the morning Kayla was born. I thought about how he'd held her first and gone completely quiet, not the kind of quiet that's stunned, but the kind that's sacred. I'd watched his face change. I'd thought I chose right. I chose a good man. I'd been wrong. But I had loved him honestly, and I wanted to carry that with me out the other side. Linda arrived at 10 sharp with her fruit salad and her beige cardigan and her warm smile. She kissed Kayla on the top of the head and complimented my kitchen and poured herself coffee like she lived there. I waited until Kayla had finished eating and gone upstairs to play. Then I put down my mug. I sat across from both of them at the kitchen table. I said, I want to talk about the equity line. The room changed immediately. Derek's jaw shifted. Linda's smile stayed exactly where it was, and that told me everything, because a real smile would have shifted too. Derek said, what equity line? I said, the one opened against this house 17 months ago, using my forged signature. The one that drew $40,000 that went toward the down payment on your rental property on Waverly Court. Dead silence. I said, I also want to talk about the $68,000 moved out of our joint accounts over the past 2.5 years, and the account you opened separately at First National. And Linda, the transfers that went to you specifically. I want to talk about all of it. Linda set her coffee mug down. Her face had rearranged into something I'd never seen on it before. It wasn't guilt. It was calculation. Derek said, Michelle, I don't know what you think you've. I slid a folder across the table. That's the forensic analysis from the document examiner. That's the affidavit from the financial investigator. That's a record of every transfer with dates, amounts, and destination accounts. And at the back is a copy of the divorce petition I filed on Thursday. Linda made a sound. A very small sound. Derek opened the folder. He looked at the first page. He looked at the second. He closed it. And then something happened that I had not fully prepared myself for, even after all those weeks of preparing. He started to cry. Not dramatic movie villain tears. Just genuine, broken down crying from a man who had been caught and knew it and couldn't find a way forward. He put his face in his hands and he cried. I watched him. I felt something. I want to be honest about that. Some piece of me still loved the version of him I'd believed in, and watching him fall apart hurt in a way that surprised me. But I had done my grieving in that backyard in the dark. I didn't have any more to do right now. Linda spoke first. She said, You're being dramatic. This is a misunderstanding. I looked at her. I said, Linda, you were in my home every Sunday for 4 years. I cried on your shoulder. I trusted you with my daughter. You sat right in this chair and told me I was a good wife. I paused. The transfers to your account go back 22 months. What were they for? She said nothing. I said, the attorney already knows. I'm just asking you because I genuinely want to know. What was worth it to you? What did you get that was worth all of this? Still nothing. I stood up. I said, I'm going upstairs to be with my daughter. When you leave, please don't take anything from this house that isn't yours. My attorney has a full inventory. I walked out of that kitchen and I did not look back. I won't pretend the aftermath was clean or quick or satisfying in the way revenge stories are supposed to be. It wasn't. The divorce took 14 months. 14 months of depositions, financial disclosures, mediation sessions, custody hearings. Derek initially contested custody. He claimed I was emotionally unstable, that he was the more stable presence for Kayla. That argument lasted exactly 2 hearings before Patricia introduced the PI's documentation of Kayla's unauthorized visits to the Waverly Court property and the extent to which Derek had kept that from me entirely. The judge was not amused. I was awarded primary physical custody. Derek got visitation, supervised initially, then unsupervised as things stabilized. And I am grateful that Kayla loves her father and he loves her, because regardless of what he did to me, she deserves to have that relationship. And I made a decision early that I was not going to use my daughter as a weapon. The financial piece was complicated. The forged equity line opened a criminal investigation that ran parallel to the civil proceedings. Derek's attorney negotiated aggressively. In the end, Derek did not face criminal charges for the forgery. The DA's office cited complexity and the retirement of the notary as factors. But the civil judgment required him to repay the full equity line amount plus interest from the divorce settlement. I kept the house. I got a significant portion of the marital assets. Linda and I have not spoken since that morning. She sends Kayla birthday cards and Christmas presents, and Kayla sends her drawings in return, because Kayla loves her grandmother and I will not take that from her. But I am not in those conversations. Linda is a part of my daughter's life, and she is not a part of mine. That is the boundary I drew, and I have maintained it without apology. Stacy, the woman at the rental house, turned out to be someone Derek had been seeing for about 2 years. She did not know the full picture of what he'd done financially. She ended their relationship when the investigation became public. I don't carry any anger toward her. She was deceived too, in her own way. Renee threw me a dinner party the month the divorce was finalized. 8 women around a table in her backyard, string lights, good wine, the kind of loud laughing that you only get when you're on the other side of something terrible and can finally breathe. My mother cried again, differently than Linda had at my wedding. These were the right kind of tears. It's been 2 years now. Kayla is in 3rd grade. She is brilliant and loud and opinionated, and she draws the most detailed pictures of any 8-year-old I've ever seen. She draws our family differently now. It's her and me and sometimes our dog, a beagle she named Cornbread, and sometimes her dad is in the picture too, on the right side, a little separate but still there. I got a promotion 6 months after the divorce was finalized, partly because I had been working extremely hard as a way of not falling apart, and partly because I'd spent 14 months developing a precision and a stillness under pressure that I didn't have before. My director told me I'd become one of the clearest thinkers on the team. She didn't know what had produced that clarity. I just smiled and said thank you. I started therapy during the divorce proceedings, and I still go. Every other week. It is one of the best decisions I have made, and I say that to anyone who will listen. I have not started dating again. I'm not ready and I'm not in a rush. But I've started wanting things for myself again. A hiking trip I'm planning, a pottery class I joined last fall, a friendship with a woman named Danielle from my neighborhood that started over a broken fence dispute and turned into something I genuinely treasure. Life is finding its way back in through the cracks. I used to think that the moral of this story was about watching out for the people closest to you, about not trusting too freely, about protecting yourself financially and legally. And those things are true. They're real lessons and I paid real tuition for them. But when I sit with it quietly, the way I do sometimes on my back patio at night, when Kayla's asleep and Cornbread is snoring on the porch and the neighborhood is quiet, I think the actual lesson is different. It's not, don't trust people. It's, know yourself so completely that when something is wrong, your body knows before your mind catches up. That cool draft I felt through the door I couldn't explain. That was right. I knew. Some part of me knew from the very beginning. And I talked myself out of it because I was afraid of what the knowing would cost me. The truth isn't the enemy. Avoiding the truth is. I had to lose almost everything to understand that the most important thing I could protect wasn't the house or the money, or even the version of my marriage I'd believed in. It was me. My name. My clarity. My daughter's trust. I still have all three. That's the story. That's all of it. Thank you. Thank you for sitting with me through this. From the very first minute to right now, thank you. I know this one was heavy. I know it took something from you to hear it. These stories aren't easy to carry, even as a listener. But I believe they matter. I believe that when we hear stories like this, messy and painful and complicated and ultimately human, we become a little better at seeing what's true in our own lives. And I believe that's worth something. Now tell me, where in the world are you? I want to know. Drop your city, your state, your country in the comments right now. We have listeners from over 70 countries on this channel, and every single comment makes me feel less like I'm talking into a void and more like I'm actually sitting across from a real person. Which is all I ever want to be doing. Tell me where you're from. Tell me what kind of stories you want to hear next. This channel belongs to all of us. And if you made it all the way to the end, you are exactly the kind of person I'm making this for. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. You genuinely never know who in your life is sitting with something like this and just needs to feel a little less alone. We'll see you in the next story. Take care of yourselves out there. And remember, the truth is patient. But it always finds its way home.